Hey guys, Dr. Brian Mann, University of Miami. I just wanted to share with you a study because it's been making some waves here recently, thanks to Mike Boyle. So I wanted to get to the root of everything with this, and not have improper nomenclature or mistakes or misunderstandings as a result of this. So I just wanted to give some clarification. This paper is the comparison of lower body strength, power, acceleration, speed, agility, and sprint momentum to describe and compare playing a rank among professional rugby league players. So this is from Dan Baker and Rob Newton, who are two, fantastic researchers that definitely know their way around sport and around a research lab. Dr. Baker was the strength and conditioning coach for the Brisbane Broncos for a long time, and Rob Newton is. If you don't know who Rob Newton is, take your right hand, put it way back as far as you can reach behind you, and smack yourself in the back of the head. And then quickly go look at his research gate, and he's got a lot of stuff on a lot of different areas, from different health to sport. But let's get to it. So they had two different levels of player. They had the National Rugby League versus I believe this was the State Rugby League. So you can think about Division One versus Division Two. Uh, so their heights, not any different, man. We're talking about less than a centimeter different on height, and the standard deviation is exactly the same. So there's definitely no significant difference in their height. Body mass, though, we see that there's about a 7 kilo difference, right? So that's about 15 pounds. And the National Rugby League were about 3 years older, which, yeah, no kidding. You're going to be a little bit older by the time that you actually make the national team as opposed to state. It takes time to get there. So what we're looking at is people of the same height. One group was a little heavier, and the one group that's heavier is also a little bit older. So that's not to say that this group, who is currently on the SRL, won't grow in to that extra 7 kilos within those 3 years, but that's saying that they are not now. Okay, so that's important to note as we move forward. So the aspect of what Mike has brought up, Coach Boyle has brought up, is sprint momentum. And sprint momentum, as it's listed here, I just pulled this. I did a little, screenshot and snapshot, whatever it's called. The athlete sprinting momentum was determined by multiplying their body mass by the average velocity from the 10-meter test. Now, why is it called an average velocity? Well, we have to realize that there's instantaneous and then average. And instantaneous would be the fastest point through with which that they moved, and that would be instantaneous peak, right? That would be the fastest moment throughout those 10 meters, versus the average is, say, just distance divided by time. I don't know how they got to those 10 meters, but they got there, so I can just divide the distance by the time, and that gives me a velocity. Now, they chose the 10-meter sprint because this is the distance typically ran in rugby league before coming in contact with an opposing player. So, there's a good rationale there. Some people will go ahead and say, oh, well, see, the 40, that's in American football, it's just stupid because nobody runs 40 yards except for whenever they're covering punts, excuse me, and those are the outside guys, which was the initial point of the test. But wait a second. Don't they always report 10 times the combine? Maybe it's not quite as dumb as you think. Oh, what about 20? And what if we look at 20 to 40? Well, you know what? That's a whole different topic in and of itself. But just realize that there's a lot you can do with split times, and maybe we'll do a video about that sometime soon. But let's get into that momentum. How to calculate it. It's just body mass in kilograms times velocity. So how do I get there? Well, all I do is, if you're in the States and we're using the empirical system, we're going to have to take our pounds and convert it into kg. Okay, so that's just dividing it by 2.2, right? And that's going to give us kilograms. Well, for the velocity, if you don't stop and think about, well, what are the units, and then allow yourself to figure out and calculate from there, because God knows I didn't for a long time. I was like, what? We can get a velocity from this? The first time that I ever thought about it, which was like one of those facepalm moments. But all velocity is distance and time, especially mean velocity. So it doesn't even matter what the distance is that you have, and what the time is that you have. You will have a mean velocity, and then that would be you could use that to compare against the individual athletes, as long as you're running the same distance. every time. So in sports where there's a historical sprint, like obviously with American football in the 40, baseball with the 60, uh, that when we've got these numbers, we can simply calculate the distance and the time. So all you do is you throw the sprint distance in meters in the numerator and you divide it by the individual's time. Okay, and that gives us velocity. And then we'll multiply that number times the body mass, and that gives us momentum. It's nothing earth shattering. It's nothing that you've got to have some special tools to do. You got a stopwatch, you've got a distance, you've got a time. You can calculate momentum. There's so many other things that we can do. And you know what? There's actually, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys a preview of an article that I'm currently working on right now, is the use of sprint momentum as a evaluative means for changing performance over the course of a career versus just the traditional time. And we're getting some pretty cool stuff there. And whenever I actually get it published, I'll share with you guys the results. I don't want to do it too early because what if I did something wrong and that a reviewer picks it up? Well, I don't want to throw something out there that's incorrect. So that's why I'm holding off on it. But I'll share that with you guys whenever the time comes. But we could do it for anything, guys. Right? Any distance, any whatever it is that you're wanting to look at, we could calculate the momentum. Now, if we look here, here's the table. Here's the only table. I mean, this is a super simple study. It doesn't take an Einstein to look at this stuff, right? Let's start over on the 10, the 40, and then their agility testing. And to be completely honest with you, I don't remember what agility test they used. I'd have to go over to my other computer and look. But we've got their times. And as we notice, there is not a asterisk anywhere here. So we know that 1.61 to 1.60. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that the lower guys were actually a little bit faster at the 10. Okay? So it couldn't be speed that makes the national team person better than the state league. Oh, it must be the 40. Damn. The 40, they're faster still, 0.02. And then we look at the agility time. That's got to be it. Well, yeah, a little bit, right? But there's not a significant difference. 8.89 versus 8.94. It's like, how is there no significant difference when we look at the standard deviation and, like, 0.03, 0.37, 0.24. We see that, man, there's not a whole lot of difference there. The overlap, there's no significant difference. But what do we see? The 1RM was a little bit higher, but these guys are also heavier. So that might come out in the wash whenever we look at relative strength. And maybe I'll pause this here in a minute and go calculate that out just to see if there was a difference. Well, you know what? I don't even have to do that. Let's just open up Excel and we'll calculate it for ourselves to see if they are both the same strength relatively. So this is how we will do some things, and you're welcome to my world here. Yes, I'm not going to update now. I'm pretty bad about that. We know that one of the squat maxes was 175. The other one is 149.6. Let's come back up here to look at the body weights, which were 98.2 and 91.3. So hopefully I can remember that. My daughter kept me up most of the night, so my short-term memory is pretty fleeting. Then how do you calculate relative? If you didn't already know this, you just divide the max by the body weight. There you go, 1.78 and 1.63. We could probably throw this into something to find the Cohen's d and look and see if there's a statistical difference or an effect size there based off of the numbers. But I would wager to say that the National Rugby League group is still stronger significantly. Now, as we look back here at the data, we see that there is a difference in the strength. There's also a difference in the power. Might as well also see if there's a difference in their relative power. Okay, so let's look here. 1897, 1701. Then let's just go equals this divided by this equals this divided by this. And we see that there's a very, very small difference if we're looking at relative power from the jump squat. Now, how do they do this? The jump squat, what they actually did was Rob Newton had a thing he called the plyo rack, and basically it's like a Smith machine with a tendo hooked up to it, right? So the individuals jumped with, I believe it was 40, 60, 80, and 100 kilos, or 40, 75, and 100, something like that. That they had 3 or 4 loads that they jumped with. Typically, I think Dan goes 40, 60, 80, 100, and that's probably what they did. They took the peak power from that, and that. So it's no surprise that, hey, the stronger group was a little bit more powerful, especially since it was done from load. But then we see here where the biggest difference lied, and it is within the momentum, where we see we've got that difference of about 40 kilogram per second. Actually, this should be kilogram meter per second, so that there's a typo there, but I mean, that's okay, dude. Typos happen all the time. So what does this mean? It means that those who were on the national team were stronger, were not quite as fast, were maybe slightly more agile, not statistically significant, but they did possess a lot more momentum. And I think that is something that's important to take into account. Now, why? Because I think as coaches, sometimes we just get too hung up and we can't see the forest for the trees. You know, we'll see this one article and we'll think that, whoa, this is everything. You know, there was that article from Headland that came out a few years ago showing that nobody made the you were very, very unlikely to make the Pro Bowl in a skill position if you ran slower than a 4.5940. You know, is there skill that's obviously involved too? Yeah, no, there is. But what we can see is that the bigger, stronger players who are just as fast are the ones who are more successful. And while some people might say that's, oh, no, duh, well, let's think about this for a second, because we'll see sport coaches or even strength and conditioning coaches so caught up on one thing or another. They'll be so caught up on strength, or they'll be so caught up on size, or they'll be so caught up on speed that they don't look for the happy medium. And the happy mediums, what are those? Well, typically it's something like a power or a momentum, where we take into account both sides or multiple sides of that equation. So, what do we know from this study? Man, one, we know how to calculate momentum. If I can get there, sorry for the Blair Witch. And you could do it easily in Excel. How can you do it easily in Excel? Well, let's just come back over here and let's look. Let's say that I'm going to start a new sheet. So this will be like a little tutorial. And we'll have player A, player B, player C, player D, player E, player, gotta put that on a new line, player F, and player G. Just because I want to be a real G. Let's throw in some body weights. Sprint time. Okay. Let's say this dude's a $185. This dude's 220. This guy's 330. Just going with the double numbers here. Let's get a 245. Let's get a $170. Let's get a 198er. And I'm just going to go and hit 3 keys here. Well, we're not going to. We already had a 245, so let's go let's pick another 300-pounder, right? So let's give him a 310. Let's give some sprint times, and this would be actually, let's go 40 time. So if dude's a $185, he's super fast, so he doesn't get hit. Let's give him a 4.41. B's 220. Let's give him like a 4.62, just randomly 330. So that's a big dude. He's going to be up in the fives. Let's give him a 5 1/4. 245. Let's say that he's a 4.81. 170, let's say that he's a 4.39. The 198er, let's say he's a 4.48. And the 310, let's say he's a 5.08. Now, what do we do? Well, we can break this down a couple of ways. It just depends on how big you want your equation to be, or if you want to have be able to break it up into its components. Me, usually I like having the fewest number of columns possible, especially if that's not something that I'm going to be using for something else. Okay? Since time and velocity are so closely related, I don't see the point in having a velocity column. So what we'll end up doing is equals body weight divided by 2.2 to turn this into kilograms times distance. Well, it's a 40-yard dash, so that's a 36.6 meter sprint divided by time. And I might not actually need the parentheses, but I'm used to doing it that way. Click and drag. Sprint momentum. And we can simply see what our different momentums are. We could see that, hey man, for this 330 pounder, he's the slowest one on the team, but by far he possesses the greatest momentum. And then the 310 pounder, we see much the same. The 245er, he's next up because he's still pretty fast. And followed closely by the 220 pounder. And then we see that the 170 pounder, who's the fastest, he's got the least momentum. So honestly, he's going to be the least likely to play, all things being equal. Now, I'm not going to say that sprint momentum is a super high predictor. Right? I think it is a factor. And I bet the R squared is somewhere around like a 0.4-ish. However, I don't think that we need to really so much worry about that. Just realize that it's a factor. If this 170 pounder happened to be, I don't know, a young Randy Moss, he's going to ball out. It doesn't matter what his momentum is. It doesn't what his weight is. Randy Moss is going to be Randy Moss. It didn't matter what you did with him. But we could use this as a guideline, right? Okay, well, we see that this person is a little undersized. So if we put on some weight on him, we keep him at the same speed. So it's just a little bit of a weight increase. What happens if we get this dude up to 185 pounds? Okay, we could see that his momentum goes up. Well, let's see if what if he even got a little bit faster, because maybe this was a freshman and he goes down to 4.36. Well, he gained that 15 pounds. Then we see, bam, his momentum came up to 705. So it's a good little tool that you can use with Excel and not have to do anything extra to your program. You don't have to do an extra test. Dude, you write the formula once, you click and drag that sucker, and you're set. Now, since we're done with our little tutorial, if you like information like this, come and join us at the U. We've got undergraduate programs. If you're wanting to be a strength and conditioning coach, you're 16, 17 years old, you're in high school like me. I knew that that's what I wanted to do at age 13. I know that I'm an anomaly, but that's okay. If you know that, hey, this is what you want to do, come join us here, man. We've got the Department of Kinesiology and Sports Science over the School of Education and Human Development. We've got a fantastic faculty. There's Dr. Wes Smith, there's myself, Arlette Perry, Kevin Jacobs, Joe Signorelli, Motaz El-Tuki. I mean, the list goes on and on. We got some fantastic faculty here that you would have for the undergraduate, and then the master's, which would be a master's in the accelerated clinical exercise physiology track. Now, you could go traditional ex-phys with a thesis option, or you could go, we've got the Masters of Strength and Conditioning that we had. It's just been absorbed into this. And it's a nice little 2-year program where you get myself and Dr. Brian Biagioli for your coursework. What if you're older, right? You don't need an undergraduate program. You don't need a master's, or you can't afford to come to Miami, which I don't blame you, dude. For going to Miami would be a pipe dream for me, since I'm a poor white boy from backwoods Oklahoma. I grew up in a trailer, for God's sake. Couldn't afford this. I got you still, man. The coach's education courses. If you're new to the field, there's a 8-week course where you get access to me. It runs 3 times a year. Fall semester, spring semester, summer semester. It's 8 weeks. It's fairly intensive. And if you don't have time for that, cool, I still got you. Or if you're not a beginner. We're soon, I'm not sure exactly when, they're actually waiting on me for once. We'll have a a selection of one-off courses that you could take and get a quiz, and you should be able to get some CEUs through the NSCA. Some of the different topics will be like the ACL tears, shoulder, posterior chain, auto-regulation of training. We've got a lot of them that are going to be coming out. So if this is the kind of information you like, please come join us at the U. Love to have you. Dr. Brian Mann, signing off.